right, this is Wrestling Doctor from Pro Wrestling Extra. Sitting here with Mark Falcone, somebody that I've known quite a few years now, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about a few things. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
It's great to be with you again. Let me tell you, when did you start in the business?
Oh, you figure it was 84 or 85.
So that was about the time when I was in Valdosta.
Yeah.
Is that where you came to Valdosta?
Yeah.
So,
I was living in Valdosta at the time, and got hooked up with Fred Avery and got in one of his classes, and it started from there.
Okay, and who was the promoter at the time? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had Grady Odom at the time, and we had a couple other promoters, and Fred was doing his own shows at the time, so we did some shows of our own in Brunswick at the time. And
I remember that.
I worked with people out of Lake Blackshear that had Thunderbolt Patterson on the show, and Bad Leroy Brown. I think Steve Lawler was running some of those shows, so it was a conglomeration of few people.
Okay, back then it was a different era than what it is now.
Oh, absolutely.
So it was a different time. Kind of, we ran circuits back then. You had promotions that ran set towns and everything. It was a great time.
Yeah, Peach State was one of the big ones I worked for.
Absolutely.
I love
Ben
Peach
Masters.
Ben Masters.
State. Okay.
Yep.
Now let me ask you this. Now you're working for CCW,
Mm-hmm.
Continental Championship Wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and you're no longer refereeing. You had refereed for how many years?
Well, you figure I started wrestling, and then I went from wrestling to refereeing, and probably refereeing at least 15.
Okay, so 15 years refereeing, and now you're working.
I'm a manager now.
You're managing now. Okay, what's the name of the group?
It's the Collective.
Okay, that's cool. So how's things going?
Real good. I got some real good talent. These guys are top of the line. CCW is probably closest to, we have an old school promotion that I've had in a long time, and that's pretty much why I stay with it.
Okay, that's something you don't find everywhere. So many of the organizations now don't tell stories, because it's a one and done. They do a show here, do a show there.
We keep our storylines the way they should be.
Right, that is old school. That's the old school way. Storylines. How about some of the other guys that are working for CCW?
We got Jonathan Wells, and we got KT. We got Fred Avery, who's a veteran from a long time. You know Fred Avery
I know
very
Fred well.
Yes. We have Logan Stiles, who comes in from Georgia. We have Omega and the Army of Darkness, which is a Kevin Sullivan type group. And I can name tons of people that we got coming. We've had Glacier in just the recent matches come in and do a couple shots with us. And it's just a whole bunch of people that and a lot of people coming out of our school. So, and KT is one of our graduates out of our school.
Okay, so I've done a lot of interviews, and I've actually interviewed a lot of guys that came out of your school in other places that are working, have traveled around and get more experience and everything.
Sure.
It's a great thing.
JD.
Yes.
JD Holla.
Yeah.
I think he goes as John Douglas now. But
John Davis.
John David. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's an awesome wrestler.
Right. There's really some good things. Now, let's talk a little bit about what it took in the old days to get in the business. I've described this to a couple of guys. In the old days, you really didn't have a lot of wrestling schools. And the wrestling schools were actually going out trying to get people to come in. How I got into it was they came and saw me and said, "Hey, you're the biggest little guy we've ever seen. How about come wrestle with us?" And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." And they said, "Okay, we get a lot of girlfriends." And I said, "Okay, I'll go." So in the old days, the wrestlers were not really sought after to pay money to go to school. They actually picked athletes like Ray Lloyd Glacier was a football player at Georgia State.
Along with his partner that was a football player at Valdosta State as well at the time. We had in our first initial class, we had the two football players. We had a Lowndes County sheriff at the time,
and that was R.D. Swain, just in case they didn't.
Well,
R.D. Swain,
yeah, for his partner, but at the time we also had another county sheriff that was in too.
Oh.
R.D. Swain is a county sheriff now, but yeah, that's how that turned out. It wasn't easy for me. I really had to stay on Fred for him to let me. Personally, the way it happened for me is a friend of mine wanted to wrestle, and he started bugging Fred. I went to Fred's house the first time that they started the class, and I wasn't even invited to be in the ring. It took me 6 months of their first class, which was Ray and RD and John, who was my friend at the time, and I got to know Fred over the time period and became friends with Fred. It took me 6 months for him to even allow me to get in. When he did, it was just for what they would feel like what a referee would be in.
Okay.
So for the first 6 months in the school, they trained me as a referee. Now here, not knowing anything, I didn't think I was training, because I was in there to help those guys.
Were you taking bumps?
No, not at the time. Not at the time. I was just doing the referee. We ended up in Brunswick, Georgia, doing my first show, and what I was doing was helping Fred. Fred was running the show, and I was helping set up the ring, and I figured I'd just be there sitting and taking pictures. That's what I was doing the first 6 months. I was photographing everybody, and what come about was the referee didn't show up, and Fred come out and he handed me a set of stripes and said, "You're going in the ring tonight," and that's how I started refereeing. And then we go back to training, and one of my friend John had quit at that time, so that left 3 people in the ring, and they wanted to still have a 4-person training school for tag teams and all that. So I started taking bumps, and I did that for another 6 or 7 months, and I'm in Blackshear, Georgia. Yeah. What they always tell you is carry your gear.
Right.
Carry your gear everywhere you go, because you never know when a promoter's going to pull you into work. So that was one of the first things I've ever learned, is always carry my gear. So I had my referee's gear with me, which means I had a set of boots and stuff like that. And I see Fred's head sticking out the dressing room, and I start laughing. I said, "Yeah." There was 3 referees that showed up that night, so I figured, here, I'm just going to end up, getting him water or whatever he wants. So I walk over, and he hands me a set of tights and a mask, and the next thing you know, I'm in the main event with Thunderbolt Patterson, and 20 minutes later, I get my butt kicked, and that's my wrestling day. Yeah.
Well, I always recommend nowadays for all referees to be trained exactly like wrestlers. There should not be any difference in the training between a referee and a wrestler, because referee's going to take bumps too.
Yeah,
so thank God you were trained and knew how to take the bumps, because you never know what's going to happen with wrestling.
No, and you know me over the years. We've been friends for how long, And
since '84.
Yeah, and we've crossed paths so much, and you've seen me as a referee most of the time. But a lot of times when I wrestled, I was under the mask, so I really didn't tell anybody, So, but the thing about it was, I was one of the referees that could take anything. There's a lot of referees that can't do that, and that's why one of the reasons why I was hired so much.
Well, you were. I always considered you the best referee in the Southeast, and I've told you that many times, and I've told that to the people too. Yeah. So. We're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay.
And I appreciate you. We can do a part 2.
Sure.
Again. But I appreciate you sitting down with me.
Yep.
And this is the Wrestling Doctor from Pro Wrestling Esther. This is Mark Falcone, formerly the best referee in the Southeast, now the best manager in the Southeast.
We'll see how that goes, but yeah.
Be watching for him, folks. Thanks now.